Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Joseph Artuso, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at OpenBCI, a company that's been developing hardware and software for creating accessible neurotechnology. So, Joseph, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Why don't we start with giving us an understanding of what OpenBCI is and its vision.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for having me. OpenBCI, we've been doing this for a while now. We've been doing this since 2014. We started as a business. We started from a Kickstarter, and it was actually a friend of mine. The founder's name's Connor Rusomano. He was a roommate of mine at college. We played sports together in college, and I remember he was coming home from his grad school one year, and he kept having electronics strapped to baseball caps and was talking about his brainwaves. And I was working in advertising at the time, and I was a bit like, okay, man, like that's cool. Like what? But what he learned was there really wasn't anything in the market for people like him, which is people that were used to working with like Arduinos, electronics, kind of open source electronics kits, Raspberry Pi, that type of stuff, but wanted to get into biosensing. And we launched a Kickstarter to create the first products that OpenBCI made, and that turned that into kind of a successful business. And we've grown a lot since then, but we like to remember that as kind of the origin story, where we came from, and talk more about what we've been up to since that was 2013, 2014 when it all got started.
Tell me a little bit about this open source bit, because when you talk about frontier technology, which is deep tech, future tech, it's a very resource intensive space, because there's lots of funding required to kind of, build a startup together. How's this open source approach helped you? And how has it contributed to the advancement of brain-computer interface? And maybe also share what benefit it offers to researchers and developers.
Yeah, so this is probably our best-selling product at the moment. It's over a lifetime. It's the Cyton board. It's 8-channel bioamplifier that lets you collect data from the brain or the heart or muscles. But what's really cool about this is we built it open source. We built it kind of fully transparent hardware schematics. You can actually like assemble your own. Most people pay us to do it because it's not that easy. But there's electrical engineers out there that have built these themselves. And what's cool about this is that while we built it originally with EEG in mind, people have used it for all kinds of stuff that we never planned on. There's a couple projects where people have used it for like stomach monitoring, or people have used it. It picks up any kind of it's just a basic bioamplifier that lets you pick up any kind of signal from the body or elsewhere. What open source has allowed us to do, and the reason why we took this approach, is because we are a small team, didn't have the resources to pursue all possible use cases ourselves. So at the beginning as a company, it was an intentional strategy to say, we want to make these tools as customizable, as flexible as possible, so that our customers can kind of do the work of proving they're appropriate for different use cases that we may not be focused on. I think we had a big advantage in the early years, and using an open source approach definitely like accelerated the rate that our products were adopted, because there was 2 people working on the company, for the first few years. They can only do so much. And, being able to answer, hey, here's all of the documentation, down to the PCB wiring about how this thing works, go try and make it possible for your own use case. That was kind of how we started in the early days. So it gave us a big advantage on that front. I think the open source side of things, there's costs associated with it. It certainly closed certain doors in terms of commercialization opportunities with bigger companies. In a certain, like there are large companies all around. Intel, IBM, Apple, Meta, all of these companies buy our products and they use them. I see demos that use our software as kind of a starting point, and they've customized it for their own purposes. And that's all perfectly fine under the licensing that we put it all into the world. And it doesn't, we don't have the ability to kind of like extract a license from that application, that use case by larger companies. It's something that, for our future generations of products, where we're considering how do we keep the flexibility of our products for, really for entrepreneurs, for people that don't want to get tangled up in the like, am I allowed to use the product in this way? They just want to buy something, get started hacking, get started doing research, allow that flexibility while still, being able to, do licensing deals with larger companies when the products are being used for sort of more larger markets or larger company use cases. That's kind of been my on the commercial side of the business. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot as we plan for the future.
I think the entire open source philosophy for a tech which is in nascent stage is so cool. You also open up access or the doorways to these tinkerers, engineers, developers who want to kind of understand what brain-computer interface is and how do you kind of leverage this. You said you gave an example how your 8-channel device is being used to monitor stomach microbiomes, guts, so how cool is that? So
Yep.
that like when you open it up to the world, and that's when these brave new developers, engineers kind of tinker around with, and you open up so much possibilities because, no matter how great thinker or an individual or a developer or mind you are, with companies, it's always happens, it becomes top-down hierarchical and there's a certain group of people who are developing things and it becomes very close. When you open it up, share it out to the entire world, the possibilities becomes completely endless. So kudos for taking that approach. Just to kind of ground the audience, I mean, it'll be great if you kind of, give an explanation of what brain-computer interfaces are, both the invasive versus non-invasive.
Brain-computer interfacing, it's kind of a broad term to use to describe any products that are involved in the connecting our brains and our bodies and our nervous system to computers. They're usually divided into two types. They're divided into invasive BCI and non-invasive BCI, or put it another way, divided into implanted BCI, things that are like inside of your body versus wearable BCI. So OpenBCI is we're on the wearable or non-invasive side, meaning all of our products are sort of like worn on the body. They're headsets or the electrodes that you stick on your skin. Whereas, companies like Neuralink or Synchron or Paradromics, those are all companies that are on the implanted side. They're putting things inside of the brain with surgery. And the advantage is you get much closer to the signals, coming from the brain that you want to use to decipher, mouse clicks or movement intent. But the disadvantage of the implanted side is it requires brain surgery, which consumer level adoption of this technology, I don't think that that's a hurdle that people are going to want to sign up for. Some of the Cybertruck pre-order customers may get the Neuralink as well, but personally at OpenBCI, we're looking more towards, okay, what does the mass adoption of this technology look like? And we really think that it's going to be wearable. It's going to be wearable devices that are more similar to Apple Watches and Oura Rings than, invasive surgically implanted networks of electrodes in the brain. So that's kind of one big distinction. But the way the devices are used, I'd say there's really two. I mean, there's many more potential use cases, but there's two applications that are most common. One of them is using a BCI to like actively control something. We call it kind of like active BCI, replacing the mouse and keyboard, replacing game controllers, replacing our hands if it's a paralyzed subject or a user who doesn't have control over their arms or eyes. BCI is often used to provide joysticks or active control of things. And then I'd say the other application for BCIs is, we refer to it as passive BCI. It's a little bit like everything else. It's more quantifying all the qualitative characteristics of our minds and bodies. Things like quantifying emotions, quantifying sentiment, or just like the subtleties about quantifying what we're paying attention to in a given moment, or whether we're, really, if you and I are talking, whether I'm really hearing you or actually listening, or if I'm over here thinking about my day tomorrow, that kind of stuff. It's a little more subtle. It's a little more, it's less about like immediate binary on or off commands, and more like, over this 10-second window, how would I plot your sentiment on a larger graph? Both applications are things that the BCIs have sort of shown promise for and are being used for today.
So recently, you guys revealed the Galea beta for the first time on stage.
Yeah.
And then you also shared your vision about Galea Unlimited. Talk to us about this device, because most of the time, the companies you mentioned, working on BCI, don't think about virtual reality as an interface, leveraging that. So maybe talk about how did that kind of fall into place?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it helps. It has to do with how OpenBCI has evolved over the 10 years that we've been doing this. We started our first line of products, like the Cyton and others, really started out as an effort to kind of, what we refer to as like, we pushed from the back. We tried to make it easier and easier to get involved in this space, in neurotechnology, by putting open source tools that were at lower price points into the world, so people and entrepreneurs could get started. Galea was actually more of a result of years of feedback and watching how those tools were used, combined with, Connor's own kind of personal vision about where the technology is going. A couple of trends that we saw in, really like the 2015 to 2019, when we started, really started working on this more earnestly. We saw our customers doing lots of research with VR and AR headsets. That people were taking our existing products and just sort of like duct taping them together with Oculus, headsets, and any way they could. They wanted to be collecting, brain data, heart data, muscle activity inside of VR. And the reason for that is because VR is a really good experiment platform. You can control the environment very well, while also provoking very realistic responses from the body. And we saw that kind of trend. And we also saw a really common theme of, the brain alone is not enough. Brainwave data alone isn't enough to do the passive BCI side of things that I was talking about, to quantify the things that you could otherwise only measure with like a qualitative survey. You need activity from the eyes. You need heart. You need your heart rate. You need people's respiration. You need multiple other touch points on the body. And so we refer to that as multi-modal data. You need multi-modal biosensor data, which is why Galea is not just about EEG. Galea has sensors for the brain, the eyes, the heart, your muscles. It has a electrodermal activity, which is like skin, sweat measurement. And really, we've built the system in mind to add more types of sensors in the future. And Galea is really our effort to, like, rather than, hey, here's all the individual pieces that you can kind of mix and match and assemble whatever way you want. Galea is like, at this point in time, this is everything that we could fit into a single headset, and like, we're trying to build the Ferrari of head mounted biosensing and put that into the world to say, we believe this is kind of represents the cutting edge of what's possible at the moment. And, the early customers we have are going to apply it in some very interesting use cases that we'll build on top of once that device is in the world next year. So
maybe you could talk about the use cases, because you said that this does multi-modal biosensing, so obviously it captures a lot of biometrics. Once it does that, what are the capabilities? What
anesthesia room.
What would be those use cases?
People are definitely trying to use it for hands-free control of stuff in VR. We're mostly focusing on use of the eye tracking and also the EMG sensors, the muscle sensors for that. We think unless you're completely locked in, unless you're completely locked in, completely paralyzed, like our bodies have evolved. The muscles are the path of least resistance to expressing our our commands for our tools. There's no need to tap into the brain if you have any muscle activity around the body that you can use, because it's just so much more reliable. It's so much faster. It's just going to be 100% accurate versus 80% accurate. So we're using eye tracking and the muscle sensors to do hands-free control schemes. But actually, what's clicked more with the companies that are buying this, the enterprise use cases where we've seen some traction, is, like I said, it's that part about quantifying things that would otherwise only be able to be measured qualitatively. So one of our very first partners on Galea was the gaming company Valve. They make Steam, they make Counter-Strike, Dota, and they were longtime customers of OpenBCI's existing products. And I thought that was cool. I mean, I've played all of those games. I'm a big gamer. I love video games. And the chance to go get to meet Valve at their offices and talk to Gabe Newell was really exciting. And what we learned from them was they were using our existing products as part of their user research, their game play testing. They weren't using it to replace the mouse and keyboard. They were using it to say, hey, this part of the game is supposed to make you stressed. This is you're supposed to be oh my God, what's happening, at this point. And they wanted to try and quantify whether they were hitting that. Are we doing enough with the game? Is the user feeling the emotion that we want? Or in a different, maybe in the, hey, this is the tutorial. We want to know that you're not overwhelmed, by what's going on. This should be this should be the easy part, and make sure that you're able to kind of stay focused on the stuff that we want you to stay focused on. Maybe we need to sort of dial down what else is happening in the environment at the moment. So that use case, they were really looking to use the biometric sensors from something like Galea didn't exist at that point, so they were very interested in a VR product that had lots of sensors on it that they could use for their game testing, to augment surveys, user-based surveys that they would do. Normally they would we'll have someone come in for 10 or 15 minutes. They'll play a section of the game. We'll take them out of the game. We'll have them fill out a survey, that tells us how they felt, and then we'll do it again. And they wanted to add real-time data collection to that loop. And it's that use case is actually, we've seen it in several different industries now. That application was it's the same in not gaming, but using VR for training, flight simulation, different activities in VR. It's the same kind of thing. They want to say, in this exercise, were we sort of hitting the cognitive states that we wanted to hit? Education, also has a very similar use case. So there's kind of a common thread across several industries where we've seen, the very first customers that are absolutely, I want one of these, send it to me as soon as it's ready. They're all looking to something around this idea of quantifying qualitative states of mind.
Right. So that's very cool, because what you're saying that, this headset will be able to allow and capture a whole lot of biometric data. Tell me,
Yep.
is this just one way where it's just capturing the data, or is it bi-directional where you'll be able to modulate a certain part of the brain? And the second question
Yeah.
is with the partnership with Valve and Vario. How does that work? I mean, do you use their entire headset, or do you get scratch components and then you guys build out the VR headset and retrofit the BCI on it? How does that also work?
I love this question. I love that you asked about the bi-directional, aspect of this, because where we see this kind of wearable neurotechnology going is that it's all on the body. It's all wearable. It's all on the body. You're not connected to a big desktop PC, that sits in your room. You're bringing it with you throughout your day, and you're constantly part of a two-way loop with this system, with your device, that you're putting conscious inputs into the device through your commands, through your keyboard, through your voice, through muscle movements and eye movements. But then also, and it's giving you conscious feedback. It's giving you the information that you're asking for. But then there's also kind of a more subtle passive loop where, based on your stress levels, what you're paying attention to, your cognitive load, different kind of metrics like that, it's optimizing information, or it's giving you suggestions about, how you should go about certain tasks. And then it's also kind of maybe subtly altering information as it comes back to you. That's that's kind of the closed loop computing. The dream of this is, in a gaming context or even in an educational context, imagine if, okay, let's talk about a game. This game is, in addition to getting your movements, it understands that, like, hey, you're stressed out right now, and it's a zombie game, and we're going to, like, we can go one of two ways with that. If we actually are able to quantify that in real time, we can change the experience so that it either gets harder or easier. If you want it to easy mode, it's like, okay, we'll turn down the difficulty and throw less at you. Or maybe you signed up for the really intense experience and you're like, okay, yeah, you're getting a little overloaded at the moment. Good, like, we're gonna, like, keep sending more at you. But the same thing applies in a lot of different, like I said, education or training. All of those can benefit from, like, a two-directional understanding of where the user is at a given moment. I think longer term, there will be other types of stimulation to the brain and body, electrical stimulation, ultrasound, magnetic stimulation, where, you can put signals, like, directly back into the brain to, maybe it's, hey, we need you to stay calm. And actually, there's research that shows if you use magnetic stimulation on a certain part of the brain, you can reduce, the fear response and help people maintain their breathing, so that if they're in this is a first responder, this is a medical situation where you need to remain calm, we can try and help you train for that feeling, by modifying activity in your brain. That's a little further down the road. We see it coming, but right now we actually think there's more than enough ability to modulate the brain through video and audio. Our ears and our eyes are the majority of how we've evolved to, like, experience the world. And another reason why, VR headsets are such a good tool is because they let you have a lot of control over the audio visual experience. So one of the things we've built internally is, like, we've just made a room. It's this room, we call it synesthesia room. And you can, the colors and the audio, the visuals and the audio of the room are linked to different brainwave patterns. And normally you and I, like, if you're just a regular person, you've never practiced with this stuff, you don't know the difference between what, like, high alpha wave feels like versus a high theta brainwave activity. And you don't have any idea, but if you sit in this room, and I've done it, I've spent like an hour and a half in this thing, like, and if you sit in this room and you just kind of look and listen, and you get the visual and audio feedback to give you visibility into something happening inside of your body that you previously were never aware of, you actually can, like, you gain this appreciation where you're like, oh, that's what, like, alpha wave feels like. I can hear it, and it's a subtle thing, but over time, I think there's a huge opportunity in this space to use visual and audio feedback to help us regulate and change responses of our body to be more in line with what we want in different scenarios. That's what we're really excited about, the two-way connection. We think there has to be a two-way connection between, like, the sensing that's happening from the body, and we're always thinking about this in terms of, with a computer, brain computer interface, and what the information the computer provides back to you. If that's two-way, there's some really exciting new ways to use computers that are going to emerge once it's technically possible to do this in a fast enough and cheap enough way.
I'm excited for how this is going to pan out. You, what would be the further roadmap or vision? Because virtual reality, like you mentioned, it's a very potent technology. Even its very rudimentary application that you kind of experience, it kind of plays around with your motor cortex into kind of believing that the virtual is real. And then I'm a huge fan of Matrix, and obviously I've seen the Black Mirror,
Yeah.
the series. So this obviously holds the pros and cons. Because once it kind of matures, because even right now we can we've got pretty good at simulating the video and the audio. The audio we can do spatial and ambisonic sound, exactly how like we hear sound. And even the visuals, 360 VR, it's pretty much getting to high resolution. Ivan Sutherland was the guy who kind of created the first AR VR headset. He called it the Sword of Damocles, and he had a vision, for the ultimate display. And I'm going to read out his quote for the ultimate display, the vision that he had. It says the ultimate display would be a room within which the computer can control the existence of matter. A chair displayed in such a room would be good enough to sit in. Handcuffs displayed in such a room would be confining, and a bullet displayed in such a room would be fatal. So, how is this going to pan out when we have something like this maturing to that the brain computer interface, VR, AI converging? Do you have like thoughts on that?
I'm excited to see where it all goes. I mean, I think, like I said, I'd like to. I'm focused on the applications that aren't fully about replicating the real world in a digital sense, but rather enhancing the way that we live in the world today. The coolest things, I think, the coolest applications that are close to what we're doing already is I talked about that loop, that kind of feedback loop with our devices, and how the sensors and things like Galea are really designed to give our devices more information than just what we can communicate with our hands and maybe our voice a little bit these days. And now imagine, like, based on this full picture of your brain and body that your devices has, it's actually it's part of the computer. It's happening fast enough that with every frame, every sort of tick of the computer's clock, it's able to alter information that's being sent to you based on exactly how you reacted to the last piece of information. There's really exciting applications and there's really scary applications of that. The scary applications are if its control over the visual and audio and all your other senses, is complete enough and it's realistic enough. Okay, is it possible to be like replacing reality for you? Is it can alter what you're seeing and how you're perceiving the world? And if that's happening in a way that you're not aware of or you're not in control of, then now we're in a Black Mirror episode, and it can be bad. And it's easy to see how that technology can develop because it's sort of how it works today with our devices. We have the status quo relationship with our digital devices is not really a great one. We're kind of used to like, okay, I'll use this service for free and you're allowed to like change the content in the news feed based on how I interact with it. And I don't really know or see or get to control how that happens. So I'm getting like constantly optimized by the services I interact with. And when you're not in control of that loop, it can be negative. If you are in control of that loop, if the whole computer is set up and the whole system is set up so that, you wake up in the morning or when you buy the device, there's a setup process that's like, what do you want to optimize for? Do you want to optimize your device for, focused work? Do you want to optimize this for creativity? Do you want to increase or decrease, certain aspects of your day, or how do you plan to use your system today? What are you trying to accomplish? If you can actually trust your personal computer, it can be a huge, a huge aid. It can be a massive assistant to your productivity, to your life, to just kind of helping you achieve the things that you want to achieve and change habits over time. But the difference about sort of whether it goes down the good path or the bad path, I think really comes down to who's in control of that optimization. Is it the user? Is it the device manufacturer? Is it the website, the app builder, or is it the government? There's kind of different stakeholders that are involved. And our view is prioritize the user. If we will avoid more of the negative outcomes, I think, by giving the user as much control as possible, so that if they're able to maintain control of this optimization loop.
We are entering this era where we're going from carrying to wearing technology, and once we do that, I mean, it's gonna understand us possibly better than we understand it. Now, who controls the data, who controls will be controlling maybe us also. So yes, I think we need to be very cognizant of that and possibly make sure that we build things that we give the user, the customers itself, the more priority and more. Yes, I think you're trying to say something, Joseph.
No, I started out before I worked at OpenBCI, I spent a long time working in the advertising and digital marketing industry. And that's, I know the mistakes. I know the mistakes that have happened with our, even much simpler data to quantify our personalities. What you click on and what you hover over with your mouse on the internet or your thumbs on your phone are used to do very precise, psychological targeting and alteration of content and optimization of things. And that's pretty crappy input data as far, compared with your brain and body. So, and we've seen I think the fight that's happening currently with advertising and privacy online, all of that kind of dispute that emerged really into the public focus with Cambridge Analytica and kind of the election scandals that was 2010s. All of that it's just we're kind of it's 5-10 years ahead of the biosensor space at the moment, because the adoption of all that is much more widespread. The adoption of social media tools and internet browsing. All of that stuff that's happening there is going to happen with neurotech. It's going to happen with wearable device technology. And, think about, as a user, what is worth paying for? What do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize, the services being free? Do you want to prioritize having control over different things? What worries me is that people in general seem to just prioritize convenience over everything else. I just want it to work, and I want it to be easy, and I want it to cost as little as possible. And that can come with negative aspects where usually, okay, great. Well, our advertisers are the ones that we're really optimizing things for, because that's how we have to pay for this expensive service that, does cost something. So I don't know. I didn't think that my advertising background would be as relevant in the neurotech space as it has become now. And I end up talking with, lawyers and old colleagues that are on the sort of privacy law side of things. And I'm like, hey, how can we build this the right way from the start, when it's brain data instead of clicks?
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure the insights from the advertising marketing industry is going to so help, because there's so many wrongs in that industry, the way we have manipulated a user,
Yes.
hoarded their data. So I hope that it doesn't get translated over here. So what's your thought on India market? Is your software, is your hardware available here in India? And are there developers or engineers in India leveraged it in building any applications? If yes, would be great if you could share them.
Yeah, I mean, OpenBCI, we're in India. We're in, our products are used in over 100 countries. It's about half of our users maybe are in the US and half is like the rest of the world, which actually is I think it's different than a lot of other. We're very international user base. There's been some cool projects out of India. I know there was like motorized wheelchair assistive technology types of things. I have to look it up. We have this program called we have a program called the OpenBCI Discovery Program, and Eddie, I can follow up. I'll send you kind of the info on that because it's how we a lot of people reach out to us. As much as we've tried to make the devices affordable, there's still people with really good ideas, extremely capable engineers that want to do. They have a great idea for a project, they know how to accomplish it, but they don't have the hardware. And it's a way for them to sort of request donations or request grant sponsorship from OpenBCI for their ideas. And there's been some really interesting projects that come out of that around the world. And I know there was a couple out of India last year. But also, I mean, it really comes down to, I think there's still a price point hurdle. I think we get customers really more from like universities purchasing our products rather than individuals. I think just because they are still prohibitively expensive for for some of the population. But there are a lot of interesting things going on. If I went and dug through the customer base, I know I would find a number of universities that had interesting projects. And there's actually the OpenBCI citations list. We uh, whenever we find a paper that used our products, or whenever a user sends us, hey, I published such and such research, we put it on a list. It's all on a Google sheet that anyone can look at. And if you started, we made it so that you can easily search it. And if you started searching for universities or India or different locations, you'd see a lot pop up. Japan is our second largest market. Nobody in the company speaks Japanese. That market has learned to sort of support itself, the community, because it's all available. We make it so that you see everything about how the device works, and there's been kind of a community that's evolved in each market to serve kind of the local language needs. And it's something that as we grow, I would love to add, the ability to grow more in individual markets. But I think India has benefited from that as well, where there's extremely capable, extremely well educated population, extremely capable engineers. There's the technical ability is there to do incredible things with the products. And whenever I do see a project that comes back, I'm like, nice, like this is exciting. Like I wanna make sure other people in the region know about this.
Right. Any advice for aspiring researchers and entrepreneurs who are interested in entering the field of brain-computer interface?
Make something. Make a project. Make a video about your project. Make a GitHub repo. Do a project. Build a thing. Make a demo. Make a simple proof of concept. Document it and put it online. The most that is, when we're hiring people, when we look at at hiring, it's a huge plus. Anytime someone, regardless of what their educational background is and their other skills, if somebody comes and like, hey, here's like a link to a YouTube video and a GitHub repo for I made a little sort of remote controlled robot toy that I hacked to use muscle activity instead of a joystick. Anyone that's done that kind of stuff and shown that they can document it well, and that it's it's a good project, it kind of immediately changes the way that we look at candidates that have that kind of stuff. Because by doing those types of projects, and it's really, I can't emphasize enough, it's the process of documenting it for other people that matters. Because if you show that you can do that well, if I'm looking at them like, hey, yeah, this is a good set of instructions, I think even I could follow this, and I could reproduce this. That's where we're still at as an industry. There's still tons of teaching involved, and as a company, if you're looking to get jobs with companies, being able to show people, hey, I can teach someone how to do projects in this space, or I'm effective at sort of documenting the work that I do. It can help convey things that don't get communicated by, just your list of skills or lists of educational or work experience. I think seeing people's, hey, you got involved, you made something, you got your hands dirty with the technology really goes a long way.
Right. Joseph, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. OpenBCI, I think, is obviously such a unique company with such a unique vision. And I'm sure in the next few years, you guys will be fronting the entire brain-computer interface, leveraged with virtual reality, with all the wearable conversation forward. And I guess in the next few years, we will be moving on to varying technology. And once we do that, the kind of data they'll be collecting is going to be humongous. It's going to change the world. And I hope that, we create products keeping the consumers in mind, which you've been talking about. And I hope we empower consumers, unlike the Web 2.0 or the way we have been doing. So more power to you and the OpenBCI team. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, just really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was great.